Welcome back to Love, Money, Rock and Roll on the Ellie route. This is Catherine, and we go to our kitchen. To what do I owe the honor? We haven't talked for so long and it looks like you aren't happy to see me. Yeah, and we hadn't talked for a year and a half before that. As I remember, you weren't so friendly with me when you returned to Japan. True enough. She suddenly agreed, wrapped her arms around herself and lowered her head. So what's the ball about? It's at Kobayashi Ellie's place, heard of her? I had no reason to hide anything from Catherine, unlike Himitsu. Moreover, I suddenly realized that I never thought of her for a while. I have, but I had no idea you two were so close. I'm playing in the same band as her now. So you've picked up your guitar again? Something like that. Well, congrats. Thank you, everything's happening so fast I still haven't figured out what's going on. She's attractive, you're a picky guy, only going for the very best. You mean yourself? Modesty adorns a person, but I like good enough without it. But still, it looks like things are going fine for you. Relatively. Such terrible things are happening around you, but you're enjoying life anyway. What terrible things? Those murders? Ah yeah, that's unpleasant. You never know how your fate will turn out. It's better not to think about it. Although not thinking has always been the most difficult part for me. That's an understatement. Better not to think about that. She repeated quietly and looked at me dolefully somehow. So, you wouldn't be too upset if I told you I want to return to the US? Why would I be? I don't know, why so sudden? You've only been here for a couple weeks. I shouldn't have come back to Japan, it was a mistake. I didn't know how to respond to that. Catherine looked upset, reserved and grim. As if someone had forced her to come here and say all this. Maybe it was her mother again. Did you make that decision yourself? If you mean my mom, she has nothing to do with it for once. Then I don't really get it. You don't get what? I braced myself, not all honesty was good when it came to Catherine. Then why did you come back? I told you already, it's because of my mom's job. So the job doesn't matter anymore? Now the circumstances have changed. Really? How come? I'm not asking for a report about, for instance, your relationship with Kobayashi Ellie. Yes, but I don't spend my life jumping between islands and continents. Are you lecturing me? I don't even know. Why did you come here if you didn't want to tell me anything? To say goodbye? Is that surprising? She suddenly laughed and a tear gleamed in her eyes. I don't even know. What reaction did I expect? I should have just written another letter you'd never read anyway. What was so important in that letter? I felt like I'd done something unforgivable by not reading it. Just like when your numbers in the lottery are one off from winning. You took the letter yourself. I tried to object timidly. After you'd kept it for how long? A year? It's in the past. That's... what's there to talk about now? In the past. She flung her arms up in the air and turned away. Look how quickly things changed for you. Just for a few days, you were running after me, crying about old times, and now you're putting on that stupid suit thinking you look like a millionaire. I'm not. You know, I really shouldn't have come here. If I had just left, you wouldn't have even noticed. Yeah, probably. Bye! What would I say, do? In her last words, I could not hear just disappointment, but resentment and even regret. Women always Women always enjoy having admirers, even if they don't take them seriously. Was this the same thing? Had my entire relationship with Catherine never been anything more? No, I couldn't believe that either. Had Catherine decided to leave and already standing on the plane ladder, finally realized she was losing something important? Even that, if it was the case, it was too late. And not only for her, for me too. It seemed that I had been noticed turning this new page in my life. As if I'd gone to bed one person and woken up as someone completely different. I spent the remaining hours before the ball languishing around. Catherine hadn't chosen the best time for her visit. I took a taxi and got to Kobayashi's estate past sunset. Looks kinda nice outside. It'd be a shame if it blew up. Heh, heh. Doubt that's gonna happen. Appearing out of the darkness, a long cavalcade of luxurious cars was lined up before the gates. My driver whistled when we came closer and assaulted me with inappropriate questions. Finally, I left the car and looked around. On the one hand, it wasn't as scary as they had imagined, but the obvious otherness of the place was still a bit frightening. The other guests seemed quite comfortable here, greeting each other merrily, laughing, walking up the stairs to the 4-meter-high doors. It took an effort to follow them. Yes, it does look extremely fancy. If you look to your left, you'll see an anime protagonist. Inside the Kobayashi estate was an even fancier, like a photo taken somewhere in the Louvre. I found myself in a huge hall already full of men clad in formal suits and women in gorgeous dresses. Nobody's paying attention to me, but I still felt wobbly on my feet. I leaned against one of the columns and shuddered when a waiter addressed me. "Would you like some champagne?" I automatically grabbed a glass from the tray and looked at the waiter through it. Distorted by the sprinkling liquid, his emotionless face looked like an ugly mask to me. "Thank you," I briefly replied and took a sip. I remembered Michael's advice. Yes, I remembered alcohol's advice about being careful with Michael at events like these. Where is that barely perceivable line that separates a drink for courage and 2 bottles down from failed self-control? I decided to think about that later and emptied the glass. Ellie was nowhere to be seen, and I could already feel the alcohol going to work. Michael had been right about the champagne. In order to distract myself, I started looking over the crowd. The women were the most visually distinct parts of it, while the men who accompanied them, though differing in height, weight, hair, or lack thereof, more or less blended together into the samey mass of black and white. Hold up, is that Arena? Suddenly, a strange couple stopped by the column I leant against, a man of unidentifiable age, wearing inappropriately dark sunglasses, and a woman who strangely looked like Arena. For a while they just stood there, paying no attention to me, but then the woman spoke Russian. That lady's wearing such a wonderful dress. She made a vague nod off to the side. Apparently pointing fingers was bad manners. Is it just my imagination, or is she together with the gentleman who came in the Rolls Royce? Natasha dear, nothing gives away a person belongs to a lower classes more than an understanding of expensive clothes and cars. Victor. His companion's exclamation followed. Could it just be a coincidence that out of all of the guests, the one standing next to me turned out to be Russians? Or had Arena sent them to make sure I completed my assignment? No, then it would have been easier to get it to someone who wasn't a high school student. But the champagne was working. I'd heard my own voice before I even finished considering whether I should talk to them. Sorry for eavesdropping, but since we find ourselves in the same company, so to speak. You're from the USSR, right? Oh yes, how'd you know? The woman asked with surprise and gave me a friendly smile. Probably by virtue of having ears. Victor, you're unbearable. By the way, the name's Natalia. Nikolai. I introduced myself and looked at the man. His eyes were hidden behind those dark lenses, making it impossible to guess what he was thinking about. But for some reason it seemed like he was silently chuckling at me. Victor? It's not often that you meet someone of your age here, Nikolai. She suddenly stopped, then suddenly waved her hands as if she'd realized she said something ridiculous. No, I didn't mean that. It's alright. I was invited by the mistress of the house. Could I even call Ellie that? Maybe Kobayashi-Jun had a wife who would be Ellie's grandmother. Then she more or less had a right to be called the mistress of the house. So you must be Elizabeth's classmate. Something like that. Little Ellie has grown up so fast, already inviting a suitor to a ball. We aren't. Well, the lad clearly doesn't mind. The man grins, skillfully snatching a glass of champagne from the tray of a passing waiter. To be honest, I've never been to a ball before. Then have some. Helps with the nerves. He handed me a second glass that seemed to appear out of nowhere. No thank you. It's against the law here for me to drink. Yeah, and what were you doing just now? Victor asked, disappointment audible in his voice. My cheeks burned red, but I didn't reply. Stop trying to turn the young man into a drunkard. One or another, since I started the conversation, I had to get to the point. If I may ask. Look at that, you're speaking like a real Japanese already. Victor, I continued in a less confident tone. Do you work at the Soviet embassy? I work on a joint Soviet-Japanese company. And Victor is a famous writer. Quite well known in certain circles. Small enough that the boy wouldn't have heard of me. What do you write about? Life? He replied vaguely, drank his champagne at one go, and looked rapaciously around the hall searching for a waiter. Sorry, I'm mostly into science fiction. Our last full editing corner. He laughed loudly, but to my surprise nobody paid attention to us. He was more likely to someone the KGB would have under surveillance. I couldn't say certain about Natalia, though. Arena had pretended to be near her at first, too. Well, it's nice to meet you here, I mean, in Japan in general. Compatriots, so to say. The pleasure is ours. Kimiko, so glad to see you. She immediately ran away, leaving me alone with a strange rider. Don't be so tense, I'm not. You'll find your girlfriend. And indeed, I finally saw Ellie as she was coming down from the stairs from the first floor. Excuse me. I said, and quickly maneuvering between guests made my way to Ellie. I was starting to think you abandoned me here. Nick, hi. Ellie looked like my presence was a surprise to her. You look good. She was wearing a long snow-white dress and really did look stunning. Let's make a backup save, just in case I make a horrible decision, because I'm good at that. Although I think I did the right thing by not drinking. Normally alcohol will mess up situations like this. I mean, it's a very beautiful dress, you're very beautiful. Thank you. She grew embarrassed. Was this really the first time she'd ever heard a compliment like that? Sorry, I'm a bit, don't worry, I understand. Ellie smiled and all the tension disappeared at once. She understood. Let's dance? I don't know how. Don't worry, just follow my lead and everything will be alright. If you say so. Had I been sober, I would have never agreed to this. And it probably would turn out even worse if you were drunk. Just like this. 1, 2, 3. No harder than keeping rhythm on a guitar. Well, that depends on the person. She'd clearly gone easy on me with the pace. Some of the couples around us were spinning like cabins on a Ferris wheel. I carefully repeated her every move, mostly managing to keep up. But soon the silence became completely unbearable, both in and of itself and due to what I'd drunk. You look taller with heels, you know. I don't think I'll ever get really used to them. Sure, I have to wear dress shoes sometimes, it can't be helped. It's cool in a way. You weren't wasting time without me either. You even made small talk with someone I saw from upstairs. Those. I just heard them spoke Russian. Russian? So you found some of your countrymen, great. Yeah, I guess. While I was almost sure about Victor, I still couldn't make up my mind about Natalia. On the other hand, was that important? After all, there were only 2 possible outcomes for Arena. I would either bring the photos or not. I immediately felt the unpleasant weight of the camera inside my inner pocket. Good thing they weren't searching guests at the entrance. What do you think? What you thinking about? Looks like you're somewhere else. Sorry, I'm a little anxious, you know. I've never been to a ball before. I've been getting dragged to all kinds of places since I was a kid, and I'd say they're all unbearably boring. She was behaving much more reserved than usual, I guess. That's hard to imagine. How about you imagine bringing our equipment and instruments here and performing in front of all these dead inside geriatrics? That's even harder. I caught myself staringly greedy at the shining silver trays filled with tall glasses of alluring bubbly. But I'm still glad you're here. That's because I'm keeping you from getting bored. No. Not just that. Why isn't anyone else from the band come? They don't like events like this. I see. Then it's great that Zed feels now has 2 socialized to keep each other company. When the situation called for it, she could act like a real lady. The dance was coming to an end. Mimicking the other men around me, I bowed to Ellie and she responded with a light curtsy. Lighter music started playing and couples spread out across the hall, forming groups of different sizes, starting conversations with each other, some occupying the tables with food and drinks. Thank you for the dance, that was an interesting experience. You're very welcome. Her eyes suddenly darted around as if she felt uncomfortable in my presence. I need to take off for a bit. Unfortunately, I have my own obligations at this Vanity Fair. Of course. See you later. Thoughts in time. Alright. This is gonna be great. I was left alone, surrounded by perfect strangers who didn't care one bit about me. I immediately grew anxious. My heart started beating faster and I began to sweat. So what was I supposed to do? My eyes darted across the hall in search of Natalia. She was casually talking with other guests and probably wasn't watching me. Of course, I could always tell Ellie and hope for Kobayashi-jun's protection. He probably wouldn't be happy, but there's still a chance that he'd help. Otherwise, he would have dealt with me like Arena had with Kagome. But the mere thought of this all-powerful man made me tremble inside. I had no reason to trust Arena either, at least she was Russian. Even though I didn't always agree with the motivation behind her actions, I could still understand them. And what did Ellie's grandfather want? Money, power, and even more money? Would he bring me to a remote Japanese village and have me live in a dilapidated hut with Kagemaru? That sounds like it'd be extremely hilarious. That didn't sound like an attractive prospect. On the other hand, if I were Irina, I'd get rid of the unnecessary witness once I had the photos. All her talks about patriotism only applied to the domain of ideals, not individual people. We strive for the betterment of the country as a whole, for the prosperity of the people. If a small part of people suffer because of that, that's an acceptable loss. And most crucially, Irina had never tried to hide the fact that those were her morals. I wasn't one to compare socialism and capitalism, but at the moment, I felt like I'd been thrust into the middle of their struggle. And real people with real feelings were willing to choke each other to death for the sake of those ideals. Tiger or dragon, which should I trust? Once when I was little, I heard a fairy tale about these two creatures didn't get along well with each other. In that tale, the solution was discovered fairly quickly, to connect the tales of the dragon and the tiger so that they'd be forced to find mutual understanding. But in reality, the symbiosis of two separate political and economic systems did seem like such a good idea to me. And it wasn't easy to tell which one was what at a glance. But returning from the abstract to the concrete, I started to make a choice between the tiger and the dragon. Seek protection from Kobayashi-jun. No, in Japan, Kobayashi-jun had more power. And the risk was unbelievably high, now with so many strangers in this home. Anything of value would be guarded even more closely than usual. I didn't know why Irene had sent me here, but standing in the middle of this motley crowd, I was absolutely sure that I wouldn't be able to complete the mission unnoticed. There was only the moral dilemma left, could I? Did I have the right to trust the person guilty of my parents' death? Even if his guilt was unproven, the suspicion alone was enough. You wouldn't invite a guy who used to work as an accountant for Auschwitz or T, even if the Nuremberg tiles hadn't found he had nothing to do with this mass murders. But at this point in my life was on the line, and the options I had available to me were much more limited. If there were any other alternative, but I had no confidence in Irina's moral qualities either. I was trying to convince myself that I was jumping to conclusions, that I couldn't accuse Kobayashi-jun of crimes against humanity just because he was rich and powerful. And who was I to judge? When your life is at stake, the list of things you find acceptable tends to expand tremendously. Still, all the excuses very much resemble the indulgence of a collaborationist. It took at least half an hour for Ellie to find time for me again. After those girls, she managed to talk a whole lot of other people. Why the long face, Nick? Is it that obvious? On the backdrop of everything else, of course it is. I need to have a serious talk with you. Alright? She looked at me puzzled. Not here. The night's chill felt refreshing to me, while Ellie shivered and wrapped her arms around herself. You should give her your jacket, Nikolai. The jacket. It provides warmth. If I had a jacket, I'd share. The jacket, yeah. I forgot about it. Sorry, it's in my room. I'll be right back. That can wait. I'm not poor enough to have to wear the same clothes year round. Ellie, I want you to listen to me very carefully and not interrupt. So much has happened in my life in the past 2 weeks, and that would take too long to explain it all, but I don't need to. What matters is that I was contacted by Soviet spies. I don't know what they need from me. It's somehow related to my parents' work in your grandfather's company, and also our acquaintance. I understand that what you might think, that I tried to befriend you because I had a hidden agenda, and anyway, none of that is true. I realize this is all serious, but what's your point? In the end, that woman from the KGB ordered me to sneak into your grandfather's office and take some photos of his documents. One sec. I took out the mini camera out of my pocket and handed it to Ellie. I swear I had no idea what's in those documents. But I've decided I can't do it because, to be honest right now, I'm more afraid of your grandfather than the KGB. I understand. What do you understand? I understand that you're in a difficult situation, but Nick, the KGB is some serious stuff. You need to go to the police. Will they help? But if not the police, then who then? Your grandfather, I'm telling you. Sure, I can talk to Grandpa, but what? Fine. Nothing. She suddenly smiled and lit up. Wait a moment, I'll be quick. After she ran away, leaving me to freeze on the veranda, I didn't want to think of her reaction was out of indifference. But Ellie clearly didn't comprehend the seriousness of the situation. Telling her about problems I had at school would probably have had the same reaction, and that seemed weird. To what extent is a person who lives in luxury, who has never faced any serious obstacles in her life, able to sympathize with the common people? Maybe that's what I hadn't noticed in her face. Compassion. While I was waiting for Ellie's return, two servants carried dead drunk Victor out of the house and passed me as he unintelligibly recited some poems. Natalia followed him, apologizing to everyone she met. In order to not attract unnecessary attention, I prudently hid behind a column. I needed a clear head to talk with Kobayashi-jun. I didn't know how much time had passed, but when Ellie finally appeared, accompanied by grandfather, I'd almost frozen to death. The old man noticed that right away. "Good evening, Nikolai. I think we better talk inside." I gladly followed him. "Hello, Kobayashi-jun. Do you have any other clothes? You should probably get some more clothes." Elizabeth, leave us. But she's about to object but lowered her head obediently. "As you say, grandfather." When Ellie had left, Kobayashi-jun leaned against a railing and looked out benevolently at the people dancing below. "It's a wonderful evening for dancing, don't you think, Nikolai?" "I suppose." I had no idea how this evening was different from any other. To be honest with you, I didn't expect us to meet again so soon. If you're talking about me agreeing to play in Ellie's band, no, not at all. What nonsense. He turned to me and smiled approvingly. Moreover, I'm glad that she now has a serious and responsible friend. Thank you for thinking so highly of me. Now, what did you want to talk about? Ellie said it was something of great importance. Kobayashi-sama, some time ago I was contacted by people from Soviet intelligence. To be more precise, by Major Irina Mostiava. He was listening to me with an unreasonable expression on his face. And she demanded that I steal some documents from you tonight. Some documents? Certain documents, I swear, I have no idea what's in them. I only knew that there should be a logo on them, the earth surrounded by rings. Irina also gave me a camera here. I took out the mini camera out of my pocket and showed it to the old man, but he expressed no interest in it. I understand. This is very interesting. I don't know her personally, but I heard she's a capable young woman. Couldn't argue with that. But I said nothing out loud. And as I understand, Nikolai, you decided not to collaborate with her? Yes, why? Why? I don't know, maybe because I like your daughter. That seems like a reasonable explanation. I really could have tried to find the documents, but in the end I trusted my gut on which was the lesser of two evils. I don't think she can be trusted. For a moment his face became tense. Apparently, Ellie's grandfather was carefully thinking about what he was going to say. Does that mean you trust me? Yes, I responded without a second thought. I'm glad you're sincere with me. He smiled and gave me a pat on the back. It made me shrink away, an electrical impulse shooting up my spine. Don't worry about a thing. I'll handle it. But these people will do you no harm. But Kobayashi-sama, with all due respect, I'd like to know what to do next, how to deal with her. Next time, if there will be a next time, you just tell her that you will not work for her. Will she really accept that? I'll bring it to the attention of the right people that you're under my protection. She won't have a choice. His words were surprisingly similar to Irina's promises about the KGB protecting me. The creation of imaginary threats and promises of protections have been the main weapons of skilled manipulators throughout history. On the other hand, what did I expect? A personal squad of bodyguards? That's very generous of you. Of course. He suddenly smiled wide. I can do no less for a young man who is so trusted by my granddaughter. You see, Elizabeth might be wayward, but common sense has always been her strong suit. I see. Maybe even Kobayashi-jun was no stranger to human follies, and just like any other grandfather, doted on his granddaughter. So don't worry about a thing, Nikolai. Now go. This evening is for you, the young. Talk, dance, enjoy life. Meanwhile, I'll make all the necessary arrangements. I lingered for several seconds, but didn't know what else to say. Then if I may. I searched for Ellie as I slowly walked down the stairs. If not entirely, she didn't know all the details, but she still understood that I was in some trouble and needed her grandfather's help. And now if something were to happen to me. Although, wasn't I overestimating how important I was to Ellie and the potential pain she'd feel from my loss? Maybe the old man thought she could get over my disappearance just the same way she'd gotten over breaking her favorite toy when she was little. These thoughts made my head spin, and I had to lean on the railing. Then why the show? After all, nobody needs any unnecessary witnesses. With every minute, I could understand less and less. But for one thing for sure, I really don't want to go home where Irina could be waiting for me. I finally found Ellie and walked over to her. Here I am. Had your talk? You look like you've just found out that you've only got a couple weeks left to live. Seriously? If Grandpa said something wrong, no, everything's alright. He's very nice and helped me a lot. Well, promised to help. You weren't saying that just to be polite, right? Me, polite? Never. It just sounds so much like my grandfather. She sighed and looked up at the now empty balcony. All of my friends are scared of him. I can't imagine why. But a weak-willed person wouldn't achieve what he has. Nobody says that. He's just protecting me. I know it might seem like he's too much sometimes, but that's just how he is. It's always good to have someone who cares about you. You're saying it like, well, yeah, I don't have anyone. Except Amitsu when she had run away. That's very sad. Sometimes Ellie was virtually exploding with emotion, but other times she seemed inexplicably callous. A person can get used to anything. But I guess even if some people leave us, that doesn't mean we'll always be alone. Soon you might meet someone else following the same path as you. Theoretically. I mean, just don't give in to despair. I won't. That's the spirit. Right. Ellie apparently didn't know how to continue the conversation, and I didn't mind saying nothing. Want to dance more? She finally asked. Let's. I sure didn't offer her a hand. The second time, dancing wasn't nearly as embarrassing or confusing. We were swirling in the middle of the hall, and I was holding up far more confidently than before. So, are you gonna tell me what you and your grandpa talked about? I didn't know whether to tell her the truth. I don't know, I keep feeling I'm gonna be making lots of choices, and I really don't want to make the wrong one. She could look calm one second and then explode and do something stupid the next. Ellie looked at me inquisitively and was about to say something, but I was faster. Have I told you you look beautiful today? If not for you, I don't know where I'd be. You and the guys in the van, of course. You guys are exactly what I need right now. Is this related to what you're talking about with my grandfather? Partially. Sometimes it feels like you're just using me. Ellie smirked without a hint of anger, but the sorrow in her eyes was unmistakable. Then I realized I had to do something immediately. I couldn't just drift along. It wasn't even important what she suspected me of, really. Having an agenda behind my interactions with her or something else. The main problem was losing her trust. And right now, she was the only link connecting me to Kobayashi-jun. Although I didn't entirely understand the old man's behavior, I had to act on the assumption that he had the highest chance of being true. In the end, I did what seemed to be the only logical thing of the situation. I kissed Ellie. She didn't understand right away what was happening, but then timidly responded to the kiss. Could it be our first time? Strangely, none of the guests paid attention to us. They didn't care at all for anyone else, excited by the merriment and the champagne. Finally, I pulled away from Ellie. If I am, then only for this. I wasn't ready. The element of surprise is the entire point. Are you serious about all this? Of course, I like you. And if you're thinking about Catherine or Mitsu, no. The dance was over and we walked to the least crowded wall. I don't care about the past, you know. Ellie livened up, raising her at me, her eyes full of visceral hope. I think I fell in love with you right away, from first sight. What am I even talking about? What's so special about me? You're the protagonist. You speak so beautifully, and if you had to hear me talk, that's not first glance. Oh, come on, that doesn't matter. Ellie came close, raised her head, and apparently waiting for my reaction. I kissed her again, this time, but very briefly. I don't think it'd be right if your grandfather saw us. He's already locked up in his office, talking about business with someone. I'm sure he has eyes and ears all around the place, and I have nothing to be ashamed of. Nor do I, it's just after our talk today. Oh yeah, by the way. When we finally let each other go, Ellie turned all red. A strand of her hair fell out of place. I didn't expect it to be so... What, this? I need to go to the ladies' room. You know, I should probably go. I need to be home. I quietly looked at the clock. Before midnight. Yes, before midnight. Is somebody waiting for you there? No, I just need to trust me. I'll explain everything later. Alright. Ellie agreed reluctantly and took my hand. See you tomorrow then? See you tomorrow. And then we kissed goodbye. The moment I got into the taxi, I felt extremely tired, and the entire trip back from Kobayashi's estate blended into a single dance of light beyond the car's window. Fortunately, my home greeted me with its usual silence, and for once I was happy to hear it. At the one moment, I had only one desire, one necessity: to sleep. Yeah, I can understand that much. Nothing beats a good old nap. Was there a time skip? It said 5:10. A week had passed since the ball at the Kobayashi estate. My relationship with Ellie was developing rapidly, a little too rapidly as it sometimes seemed. Of course, Irina didn't just disappear, and I still had to explain myself to her, but somehow Kobayashi kept his word. The young KGB agent didn't look nearly so confident. I learned a lot of new things about myself from her, including that the way home was closed forever to me. Not that I was particularly upset by that. It was very clear Irina had been completely unprepared for this turn of events. Apparently in a harmonious model of the world, people were meant to act on their programming like robots, and I hadn't just refused to work with her, I'd gone to their biggest enemy for protection. Disdain and, more importantly, confusion were openly written on her face. The next surprise was Kagome's release from jail. Same as before, without warning, Kiyama-sensei gathered the entire school in the yard and announced the police had found new leads and that Kagome was innocent. Just like that, casually and routinely. Today we're accusing you of murdering 8 people, and you're gonna be executed for it. Tomorrow, oh, we're very sorry we're letting you go. It was just a mistake, could happen to anyone. Totally. Of course, I understood that both the accusation and acquittal had been at the hands of someone with power. Irina had bragged that it was her work, but the KGB probably didn't have anything to do with her release. Who else was able to control the police? Kobayashi-jun. After all, Kagome's grandfather is Kobayashi-jun. Illegitimate, but still related. You'll find that out if you've watched the Kagome route, which actually answers a few questions. The number of questions grew by the day. Meanwhile, Ellie seemed to be rising ever high above the mundane world. Since we were spending as much time together, our relationship couldn't just stay platonic. I couldn't understand how her grandfather allowed his granddaughter to behave like that. Behave strangely, not by Japanese standards. And it wasn't just the risk of an unwanted pregnancy. Hold up, wait, what? Of course, with a personality like mine, I risked remaining partially disabled for my entire life. Most people do tend to mature with age. No, I didn't mind Ellie staying at my place every other day, but having her security parked in the next street over quickly started to attract unnecessary attention from my neighbors. Ellie didn't even seem to notice little issues like that, or that her behavior was a bit frivolous, to put it mildly. She was shining with happiness and love, and in the shadow of that light, this bride inevitably creates common sense was dying in agony. There was no point in hiding our relationship, nor was it possible with Ellie behaving like this. I'd endure several long interrogations from Kyosuke as well as a conversation with Saya-chan about Himitsu's disappearance. The latter was partially difficult for me. I expected shouting, shaming, and insults, but Saya did better. She conveyed all her dislike for me without the need to put it in words. After that, I spent the rest of the day feeling and looking absolutely dejected, which upset Ellie. Band practice continued. Nobody in Zed feels being surprised the two of us were dating. While I had to give credit to their acumen, I still couldn't get rid of the fact that there was something going on in the band I didn't know about. As if they weren't mentioning something they weren't really hiding but wouldn't talk about unless prompted. But I still couldn't figure out what it was. Catherine stopped going to school, but we were never officially told that she transferred. I tried to find even a bit of grief in my heart, but that part of my life seemed to have been quarantined off. They say unprocessed memories of trauma might surface again even years later, so maybe I didn't really let it go or forget, and instead had bottled everything up so deep inside I'd stopped feeling it. Time would show, and I had plenty of it, or so I wanted to believe. As for my feelings for Ellie, I definitely felt attraction, sympathy, respect, and affection for her, but the word love never came up in my internal monologue. I compared this relationship with my relationship with Catherine, even with my friendship with Himitsu. I noticed plenty of differences, yet almost nothing in common. Everything was different with Ellie. I could have spent an eternity listing the ways we were different, but that didn't change how I perceived the relationship. Limes and lemon are different in color, shape, and even taste to an extent, but if you ever decide to wipe your eyes with them, there won't be much difference. As for Ellie, she obviously didn't seem to have any problems. Partially maybe because the relationship was her first. It showed in everything she did, her incredible passion and how she lost track of time, her words and gestures. Not once I caught myself thinking she even changed the way she talked. Sure, I didn't lag behind in the bedroom, but once we went back vertical, every so often I'd start doubting myself. Oh my gosh, I'm not saying that. Huh, nice. Monday. Ellie woke me up early so we wouldn't be late for school, but my understanding is she'd overdone it by an hour. I like watching you cook. Okay then. There are thin things you can watch forever. Fire burning, water falling, and other people working. She didn't respond and kept watching my every movement with the same dreamy expression. I can't really cook, you'll see. I'm nothing like the cooks on TV. I didn't even know why I was so attracted by them. I'm sure you'll do great. How's your grandfather? I casually asked. Same as usual. Usually. Is there something you want to say, then say it. Something I want to say? Was this the time to be straight with her? I'm worried about you. Your friends died recently and you didn't have time to mourn them. But once I got to know her better, I realized that wasn't the case. She just tried to seem strong in any situation, and couldn't quite understand when she had to keep her emotions to herself and when she could let them out. I feel sorry about Miko and Mari, she said after a long pause, but I didn't know the others that well. And still, of course you're right. Do you think I'm an emotionless? If I did, you taste arsenic in your coffee. Ellie smiled mostly out of politeness, and indeed, I now had a can of coffee in my drawer, as well as a new comb in my bathroom and groceries in my fridge. One day, a man in a black suit just rang the doorbell and handed me a bag with all that stuff. In love, just like anything else, Ellie wasn't looking for compromise, and sometimes that was scary. What does arsenic taste like? If I knew, we wouldn't be talking right now. Yeah, that's an understatement. Do you think there's something wrong with me? Ellie finally asked in a voice that sounded like she had long accepted a terminal illness and was asking the doctor how much time she had left. Wrong in how I act. I should probably leave. We're about to eat and leave together for school. Are you tired of me? Why would you even think that? Because sometimes it feels like you're too tense around me. Well, maybe I am. You're too good for me. I wish. Ellie laughed. When I'm with you, I don't ever want to go back to that huge house. I don't care what others expect of me. You don't mind if I move in, do you? No, I don't. I barely forced out. What else could I say? That he did? That answer could put an end to our relationship all on its own. Whatever, it's all just silly talk. Who would allow me to do that? Though it's nice to dream sometimes. We're gonna graduate in half a year. And what next? I'll need to go to a university. I guess, is that a bad thing? I don't know. I just can't imagine myself in the world my grandfather lives in. It's hard to even be in his office, as if I can't breathe there. How can I put it? All those people there, if they had a choice, would they have agreed to work on a job like that on their own? What's bad about their jobs? Sitting at a desk the whole day, moving papers from one pile to another and staring at a screen. What's so good about that? People can't all be artists. Somebody has to do that though. It was like agreeing to stay up partying with unemployed friends when they had to go to work at 7, or when you had to go to work at 7 in the morning, while they could sleep until noon. Yeah, I get that, but the thought gives me chills. I doubt you'll have time to sit around like that and organize papers. You mean Grandpa would make me the vice president of something right away? And how's that better? Loads of responsibility and even less free time. When are you supposed to live? Now? I finished the conversation as possible. Well, if you insist. The food's ready. Do stuff yourself. How rude. It's from a Soviet film. I think we could probably find a tape of it. Want to watch it later? You bet. We were walking to school in the same route I used to go with Mitsu for years. Ellie took me by the arm, which only strengthened my cognitive dissonance. I don't know how I was supposed to act and mostly kept quiet. It seemed that initiating a pointless conversation about nothing with Ellie wasn't the best idea, but she herself never went quiet for a moment. And occasionally I'd forget who was walking by my side and saw her as a normal girl. But once bitten, twice shy, I held back and forced myself to always be on guard. Nobody discussed our romance in public. They're probably just scared to. Naturally, there was plenty of talks behind her back, which wasn't surprising. High schoolers don't need much of a reason to gossip. Yet there was a more straightforward person to be found within the walls of the school. And I guess we'll leave off here since I have no idea who that is. Clearly they don't seem that important. Actually, those eyes, they remind me of a Tokyo Rider. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. As always, goodbye.